My name is Catherine Sanders. I'm 32, and I thought I had built a life on solid ground here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I worked hard, saved carefully, and never asked anyone for a handout. But one spring evening, I opened an envelope that made my hands shake. Inside was a lawsuit, filed by my own parents, demanding $350,000 for what they called the cost of raising me. In truth, it was nothing more than an attempt to force me to pay the mortgage on a new house they had purchased for my sister Rachel. The golden child. Imagine sacrificing for years only to discover your family has turned your stability into their leverage. If you've ever been told your success makes you responsible for everyone else, stay with me, and subscribe now for more stories of drama, justice, and boundaries reclaimed. For most of my adult life, I thought if I just kept my head down and worked hard enough, I'd finally earn my parents' respect. I built a life on discipline, long hours in the office, late nights finishing projects no one else wanted, and the quiet satisfaction of seeing my savings grow in a 401k and Roth IRA. I didn't buy fancy things, didn't chase the vacations my friends posted online. Instead, I rented a modest apartment in Raleigh, decorated with second-hand furniture and hand-me-down dishes, because I knew stability meant more to me than appearances. I didn't have a husband or children, but I had independence, and I thought, maybe that would be enough. Rachel, my older sister, was the one they always celebrated. She was the golden child, the daughter who married young, had 2 boys before she turned 30, baked casseroles for church potlucks, and mailed out Christmas cards in September with everyone smiling in matching sweaters. If I was reliable, she was radiant. My parents bragged about her job, her marriage, her picture-perfect home, even when the cracks started showing. When family gathered for Thanksgiving, she got the biggest slice of pie, while I was the one clearing the plates and fixing the Wi-Fi. It wasn't that I resented helping, it was that no one seemed to notice. If Rachel forgot a birthday gift, it was brushed aside. If I showed up with wine and flowers, it barely earned a thank you. She was praised for existing, I was tolerated for being useful. That's how the roles settled over time. Rachel the star, Catherine the steady hand in the background. But even stars can fall. Rachel's husband, David, had been cheating for years, and when the marriage finally collapsed, it was like watching a porcelain vase shatter. The life she had polished so carefully was gone in an instant. She was left with 2 young boys, Ethan and Jamie, and a mortgage she couldn't pay on part-time wages at the community center. David disappeared completely, leaving no child support, no apology, just silence. I didn't think twice. I wrote the check for her attorney's retainer. I covered 6 months of rent in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment where her boys shared bunk beds and the wallpaper peeled in the corners. I picked them up from school on weekends so Rachel could have a moment to breathe. I did it because they were family, because those boys didn't deserve to feel the ground slip beneath them. And I told myself, maybe now, finally, my parents would see me not as a shadow, but as the daughter who showed up. But old patterns die hard. To my parents, my support wasn't generosity, it was obligation. Rachel's struggles became the center of every conversation, her pain narrated like scripture, while my life was reduced to pointed questions about why I was still single, why I hadn't given them grandchildren, why I lived alone in that quiet apartment. My savings, my independence, even the small victories I carved out for myself didn't matter. To them, I was the one who would always be fine. The one who didn't need praise because responsibility was supposed to be my role. Looking back, that was the moment the story began to twist. Rachel had fallen, and I caught her, but no one thanked me for it. Instead, they leaned harder, expecting more. When you're the reliable one, people stop seeing your efforts as choices. They start treating them as debts already owed. I should have recognized the danger. But at the time, I told myself it was family. And family helps, even when it hurts. It was a Wednesday evening when my phone lit up with my mother's name. Her voice, unusually bright, carried a rehearsed excitement I hadn't heard in years. "Catherine, honey, we have such good news. Can you come by tonight?" For a split second, I thought maybe David had resurfaced with child support. Or perhaps Rachel had finally caught a break. I drove across Raleigh after work, clinging to the possibility that this was one of those rare family moments where the news was truly good. When I walked into their living room, my father was in his recliner, my mother perched on the couch, Rachel beside her looking both nervous and expectant. A manila folder sat on the coffee table like a centerpiece. "Take a look," Dad said, sliding it toward me with a smile. Inside was a mortgage agreement. The kind of heavy paperwork that smells of long-term debt and commitment. "What is this?" I asked, flipping through the pages. "It's for Rachel's new house," Mom announced proudly. 3 bedrooms, a big yard for the boys. They finally have the stability they deserve. She said it as if stability was a gift they had managed to secure for free. "That's great," I replied honestly. "The boys will love it." I started to hand the folder back, but Mom pushed it toward me again. "No, sweetheart, those are for you. We've decided you'll take over the mortgage." The words didn't sink in at first. My father cleared his throat. "You've been saving for years. You don't have the expenses Rachel has. You can make the payments easily." Rachel stared at her lap, silent, as though she had already agreed on my behalf. My pulse spiked. I thought of my 10 years of savings. The careful budgeting, the small sacrifices, every vacation I hadn't taken, every night I'd chosen overtime instead of rest, all suddenly erased by an expectation I had never agreed to carry. "You bought a house knowing she couldn't afford it because you assumed I would?" My voice cracked against the stillness. Mom reached for my hand. "We raised you. Isn't it time to give back?" I stood before the pressure could break me. "I've already paid her rent. I covered her attorney. I've helped in every way I can. This isn't help anymore. This is manipulation." I left the folder on the table and walked out before the anger boiling inside me could spill over. I thought they would cool down. Instead, the storm began. The first call came from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "I can't believe you're being so cold," she said, skipping any greeting. "Rachel's a single mom. Those boys are your nephews. You're sitting on money while they're struggling." By the end of the week, my voicemail was full. Aunts, uncles, distant relatives, all delivering the same message. Almost word for word. "You don't have kids. You don't have a husband. You should help." Their certainty stung more than their judgment, as though my worth had been calculated solely by what I could give up for Rachel. I blocked numbers one by one, but they kept finding ways in, texts from people I barely remembered. Facebook messages dripping with guilt. Each note carried the same refrain: "Family helps family." But their version of family was one-sided. My sacrifices were invisible, my boundaries treated as selfishness. For me, family had always meant showing up even when no one noticed. For them, it meant entitlement dressed as love, obligation disguised as loyalty. They saw my independence not as something I had earned, but as free space they were entitled to fill. The clash was no longer just about money, it was about identity. To my parents and Rachel, I was a resource. To me, I was a person who had worked too hard to hand over my future because they demanded it. The pressure mounted until the air itself felt heavy. But beneath it all, a realization began to harden. Silence had cost me too much already. If I didn't draw a line now, I would never stop paying for a debt I didn't owe. After weeks of relentless calls, judgment from relatives I barely remembered, and the weight of silence from my own parents, I did what I'd never done before. I started preparing for a fight. I blocked every number that rang with accusations, cutting off the noise so I could think. Then I pulled out a stack of receipts and bank transfers I had tucked away in a shoebox. Small proofs of every sacrifice I had made over the years. $7,200 for Rachel's rent, $5,500 to her divorce attorney. Countless smaller payments when Mom claimed the pension fell short or Dad's truck needed repairs. Each piece of paper was a reminder that I hadn't been absent, I had been the safety net. Even when no one cared to acknowledge it. The more I sifted through the records, the clearer my resolve became. My savings weren't the family's backup fund. They were mine, and I wasn't going to let guilt erase 10 years of work. Then came the envelope. It arrived on a Thursday. Thick and official looking, stamped with my parents' names in bold letters, Linda and Jerry Sanders. At first, I thought it might be something mundane, insurance paperwork. Maybe a letter about taxes. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was a lawsuit. My parents were suing me for $350,000. Claiming reimbursement for the cost of raising me. The document was dressed up with legal language. But the intent was obvious. The money was meant to pay off Rachel's mortgage. I sat at my kitchen table in Raleigh, the evening light falling across the yellow walls I had painted myself, and felt the room tilt. My parents had turned me into a defendant. They weren't just asking anymore, they were demanding. Weaponizing the very idea of family to strip me of the life I had built. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe, and then something inside me shifted. Fear gave way to anger, and anger hardened into resolve. The next morning, I called Jennifer Madsen, a lawyer based in Durham who came highly recommended. She met me in a modest office lined with case files. Her glasses perched low on her nose. I spread the lawsuit across her desk. My hands trembling, Jennifer skimmed the papers with the ease of someone who had seen every kind of absurd claim. She didn't even flinch. "They have no legal right to this," she said flatly, flipping a page. "Parents are obligated to provide for their children. That obligation doesn't turn into a debt once you become an adult. And from what I see here, you've been supporting them, not the other way around." Her calm was like oxygen. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't cornered. I wasn't defending myself. I was preparing to fight back. In the days that followed, I gathered everything. Old emails where mom had begged for just a little help. Bank statements showing the transfers. Receipts I didn't even remember keeping. Each document went into a file Jennifer labeled meticulously, building a wall of proof that my generosity had already gone far beyond what anyone could expect. I had always been the steady one, the one who smoothed arguments instead of sparking them. But as I sat across from Jennifer, listening to her outline the next steps, I realized the roles had changed. I wasn't the quiet daughter absorbing the weight of everyone else's choices. I was a woman with evidence, with a lawyer, with the law on her side. The calm before the storm wasn't silence anymore, it was strategy. And when the case went to court, I knew I wouldn't just be standing there to defend myself. I would be standing there to reclaim the years of sacrifice that had been twisted into entitlement. For once, I wasn't going to yield. I wasn't going to let them unload their burdens onto me and call it love. The line had been drawn. And this time, I was ready to hold it. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the courthouse in downtown Raleigh, clutching the file Jennifer and I had built together. The building itself looked stern, all beige stone and thin windows, like a place designed to remind you of your own smallness. I wasn't alone, though. As I walked through the doors, I saw my grandparents, Walt and Maggie, sitting quietly in the hallway. Grandma reached for my hand, her grip soft but steady, the kind of strength that had carried me through childhood. Grandpa nodded, his eyes telling me he understood the weight of what I was carrying. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was walking in to face them all by myself. Inside the courtroom, the air was cool and tense. On one side, my parents sat stiffly with Rachel beside them. Aunts and uncles lined up in a row like an audience at a school play. They didn't meet my eyes. They didn't have to. Their presence was a verdict before the judge even entered. On my side, there were only 2 chairs filled, Grandma with her silver brooch glinting under the lights, Grandpa with his weathered hands folded neatly. Jennifer sat next to me, unflappable, her legal pad already filled with neat lines of strategy. When the judge entered, the room shifted into silence. He looked like a man who had heard every excuse imaginable. Glasses perched low, expression unreadable. My father stood first, his voice steady, rehearsed. "Your Honor, we invested our lives, our money, our time into raising Catherine. We're only asking for a portion of that back to help our other daughter and her children." He spoke as if the logic were self-evident, as if the courtroom should bend to the same script our family had been following for decades. The judge flipped a page. Specifically, "What did you spend on her education after she turned 18? My parents hesitated. My mother shifted in her seat. My father cleared his throat. "Well, at that time, Rachel had just gotten married. We were helping her and her husband get established. So you did not contribute to the defendant's college expenses? No, my mother said quickly, but my mother, Catherine's grandmother, did, and since she's my mother, we supported her indirectly. Behind me, Grandma let out a faint scoff that even the judge seemed to catch. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing, letting the silence do its work. Then it was Jennifer's turn. Calm, deliberate, she laid out the file we had assembled. Your Honor, we have documentation showing that Ms. Sanders has been financially independent since the age of 18. In addition, she has provided repeated financial support to both her parents and her sister. She handed over the receipts and bank statements one by one. This includes $7,200 in rent payments for her sister, $5,500 for her divorce attorney, and multiple direct deposits to her parents during periods they described as financial hardship. The judge studied the papers carefully, then looked up. So the defendant wasn't receiving support but was, in fact, giving it? Correct, Jennifer said. My mother tried to interject, her voice high and brittle. That money isn't relevant. We're talking about food, shelter, emotional guidance. Why exactly? The judge interrupted. Do you need $350 now? The pause was brutal. My father looked at my mother. My mother looked at Rachel. Finally, Mom's voice dropped. To help Rachel pay off the mortgage. Even some of my relatives behind them shifted uncomfortably. The air seemed to crack as the weight of the truth landed. The judge leaned back, folding his hands. So you prioritized one daughter over another. And now you expect the one you neglected to carry the burden of the one you favored? His tone wasn't cruel, just plain, and it was devastating. Rachel finally looked up, her voice small but still clinging to entitlement. She doesn't have a family. I do. That means she should help. The judge's brow furrowed. I'm not married either. Should I pay for my clerk's rent or my bailiff's children? Rachel said nothing, color draining from her face. For the next hour, the judge asked question after question, peeling away every excuse until nothing remained but the raw truth. My parents couldn't hide behind duty or guilt. The script they had relied on for so long unraveled under the steady weight of the law. When the verdict came a week later, the courtroom felt smaller, as if the air itself had cleared. The judge's voice was firm but not loud. After reviewing the evidence, I find the plaintiff's claim to be without merit. Parents are obligated to provide for their children. That obligation does not entitle them to reimbursement once that child becomes an adult. In fact, the evidence suggests Ms. Sanders has already provided significant financial support to both her parents and her sister. He paused, then added, frankly, I find your behavior toward your daughter to be brazen and disappointing. Dismissed. I didn't cheer, didn't cry, I just exhaled, a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my chest for years. For the first time, I wasn't on trial in my own family. I was free. The lawsuit ended, but the demands didn't stop. My parents went to my grandparents begging for Rachel's inheritance early, then sent me an email as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Rachel and the boys would be moving into my new house. For the first time in my life, I didn't hesitate. I wrote back, no, do not contact me again. Then I closed my laptop and made tea. These days, my home smells of coffee and fresh basil. The walls are painted the warm yellow I always wanted. And a gray cat stretches across the windowsill like he owns the sunlight. Peace didn't fall into my lap. I had to claim it, protect it, and refuse to give it away. And now I ask you, what would you do if your family tried to turn your hard work into their entitlement? Comment below, hit like, and subscribe for more stories where boundaries mean survival.